in a $3,000 budget, there's a lot of things that you can do. You still need some patience, you still need hustle, you need realistic expectations, and you do probably need 30 to 60 days at least to get this up and running. You didn't start your practice to barely hang on. I'll guess you started it for freedom, impact, and profit. This is Therapy for Your Money. I'm your host, Julie Harris. I'm an accountant, author of Profit First for Therapists, and CEO of Green Oak Accounting. Over the years, my team and I have partnered with hundreds of private practice owners, whether they're just getting started, scaling into thriving groups, or even preparing to sell. We've seen it all, and we know exactly what makes a practice tick financially. On Therapy for Your Money, I'll help you build a business that truly works for you. You'll get quick, actionable tips and episodes so that you can grow a profitable practice, increase your financial confidence, and pay yourself unapologetically. Because your work is way too important for you to burn out or go broke doing it. Love the podcast? Make sure to follow and give us a 5-star review. Here is Therapy for Your Money. Hello, and welcome back. This is episode 2 in a 3-episode series where I'm telling you how I would start a private practice on a specific budget. So today I am doing a $3,000 budget. So I have seen under the hood of thousands of private practices at this point. And so I'm just telling you where I would spend money and where I would not spend money based on a specific budget. In case you missed last week, just a quick recap. When you are starting a practice, there usually is a need for cash, right? Either it is personal funds that you have saved that you are able to set aside beyond your living expenses, or it is possibly a loan or credit card money. But usually it's really helpful when you start with a specific budget in mind. So that is part of what you have to spend. And what you're also spending to start a practice is time and energy. Those are kind of the two currencies that you have available. And so as we go from a $1,000 budget last week to a $3,000 budget this week, like what you can spend money on shift and how much you have to DIY and maybe push to a later date versus how much you can do now. So a lot of the things I talked about last week were around a not now expense, basically, right? Saying you can't really spend money on a logo right now, or if you do, it has to be a really small amount. You might be designing a logo on ChatGPT. Not that you will never get a professionally designed logo. I love them, but there's just not enough money right now, right? So we're going to talk about how things change and evolve. So specifically this week, what is changing in a $3,000 budget versus a $1,000 budget is that I just think that you have some space now for physical space. We briefly talked about it last week, but with this additional space, if you want to rent a room in a wellness center or a group practice or a shared office space, or if you're a PT in the back of a gym, right? Like now you actually have some dollars to be able to do that. You've got a little bit more wiggle room. And so this is going to give you the option of offering in-person sessions, which is helpful if you are wanting to see clients in person, if that is what your clientele is wanting from you. You could also maintain kind of a hybrid schedule if you wanted to and use that office space on occasion. But now you actually really do have money for a physical office space. Another change that I would see or recommend at this size is to outsource some non-clinical tasks. There's still a lot of things that you are going to have to do on your own. You're just not really going to have a choice. You should still be doing a lot of networking and consuming a lot of podcasts, but there are some things that you might not need to DIY anymore. So for example, you could outsource part of something that's could be fairly time consuming, which might be setting up your website, right? You can use a free template, but if that's not the direction that you are going, with a $3,000 budget, you actually can spend a little bit of money, right? So you might spend $500 on a freelancer. Again, Upwork and Fiverr are great to do that, to design you a clean professional website. And even with that budget, it's not going to be a very big website. It's going to be just a handful of pages that are going to get you started that you can add to later. There's other tasks that might be worth outsourcing. If you can, you might pay someone to set up your bookkeeping, for example. You might pay for a client intake flow set up, right? Website maintenance, maybe some light communication. You might have a virtual assistant just a couple of hours here and there to help you with some more administrative items. You might get someone to help you get a social media presence set up, right? So anytime you're spending money on those items, it is precious time that you get back. So maybe you're able to do more than you would if you just still had that $1,000 budget, or you can spend less time. So your runway might be shorter. You might be able to get up and running in 60 days or 30 days if you are able to outsource some of those tasks so that you are not doing it all by yourself. That could be really, really helpful. Also, when you have a higher budget, I would consider definitely using some of that towards credentialing. You can afford to get some help with a $3,000 budget. You might also get help right away with billing. I want you to understand how to do the billing, but if that's something that you know is just going to be something that you struggle with, especially if you take insurance, you might start on day one with the biller. You typically won't have to pay them any significant amount before you are open for business, but you can kind of plan to have that expense pretty shortly after you start, and that might help you get revenue coming in a lot faster, right? So I would still recommend you do a lot of the things from your $1,000 budget as far as setting up your legal entity and getting your bank account. All of those things still apply, but we're just building on top of that at this point. There are a couple of core items that I do think stay the same. Generally speaking, your software stack is going to stay the same. Your EHR or your EMR. I genuinely think you should pick the option that is the best for your practice, not the best price. This is somewhere where I think if you want the Cadillac, you should splurge here, because changing EMRs or EHRs is a big deal. It's a big project. And so I would rather you spend $150 right now instead of just $100 for the cheaper alternative that you don't actually want to end up with. I would just spend the money right now so that you don't have to make a transition later. Like, get what you actually want right now. But the rest of your software stack is not going to change very significantly. So your legal structure is the same, right? If you started with an LLC or a PLLC, you still would do that. You still would have that same kind of investment. I would still consider your branding and design budget to be minimal. You may choose to do like slightly nicer things, right? You might pay for a professional logo, but this is still not an area where I would overinvest. You want to be a little bit frugal in this phase and redo some things later on. So you're maybe spending a little bit more, but not a whole lot more money. Because in this budget, you have a physical address, you have a physical space, most likely. I would also really prioritizing getting a Google business profile. That is typically going to require you to verify your address. So that's why I didn't mention it in the prior episode. You may or may not actually have a business address, and I don't think you should put your home address on a Google profile. That's not typically recommended, because it could follow you for a while. So you that is actually going to be free. It's just going to take some time, and you want to build out that profile so that you are now findable on Google as well. And a lot of clients go to Google. So you want to make sure that you have a valid address in order to do that. If you don't have an address, and you choose not to have a physical space at this point, I would maybe recommend looking for an address service where you can kind of rent an address and have a professional address that you can use for various things. That might be helpful. I also next would think about investing in a CRM. So I want you to think about what are the ways that clients are coming into the practice? How are we keeping track of them? And is it a system that is easy to use and scalable? I would consider Therapy Flow's CRM. That's a customer relationship management or client relationship management. It is HIPAA compliant. Now that you've got a little bit more money to spend, like I would think about using something like that because it's going to help you manage leads, scheduling, intake, marketing outreach, and has a lot of automation available. So check the show notes. I will link to that. You that is not something that you have to use, but if you are wanting to just get up and running faster, right? Remember, with more money, we can just shorten the amount of time that it takes. That could be a great, great tool to get you up and running a little bit faster. Okay, so let's talk about a recap of what our investments are at that point. So with $3,000, we're doing either a shared space or a sublet or a very small office. You can afford to do that even on a lean budget, but where you have your own address. We are spending some money on freelancers for logo branding, design, and website. Not a whole lot of money. You're probably spending money on credentialing here or billing setup. You're getting still your basic business cards. And then the remaining buffer, if you have some left, that's going to your software, your directory listings, right? All of those items that still remain from the last episode as well. So we're just stacking things one on top of the other. So you would still have those items. What I would not spend money on with a $3,000 budget to start a practice, no lavish office, like just get your minimum viable product. You can move later, but you do not want to overspend on space because then it just takes longer and longer for the business to break even. So subletting, shared space, right? That is a great way to go to keep your expenses low and manageable. I'm still not buying, even if you have your own space, I'm not buying high-end furniture. We have clients with 5 locations who still Facebook Marketplace most of the furniture for their new offices. Like when they get a new office, they do not buy brand new things because no one cares. And 2 weeks after you open the office, it's not going to look new. So that is absolutely an option for everyone. Take things from your house that you don't use anymore. Your parent has a couch that they no longer use that's in decent shape. Like put that in there, right? What is the way that we keep things less expensive? So no brand new or fancy furniture. There's no $10,000 desk, like none of that. None of those things are happening. Use what you have, upgrade later, right? I hope you're getting that thread here from this series. Pay a little now, upgrade it later. In a $3,000 budget, I still am probably not paying for coaching yet or high cost consulting packages. Memberships, absolutely. Coaching consultation, go for it, knock yourself out. Peer support group, membership communities, yes, absolutely. Spend some money on those. But the one-on-one large coaching package, still no. And then just keep an eye on software tools that you're not going to fully use because that just can add up quickly. So I would just still continue to be really, really careful there because if you just spend a lot upfront, you're usually going to often forget that those items were there. And then, that expense follows you along. Our $3,000 budget is that bridge from like a really lean start to like, okay, we've got some money to move around here. And so in next week's episode, I'm going to talk about how to start a practice on a $5,000 budget. But in a $3,000 budget, there's a lot of things that you can do. You still need some patience. You still need hustle. You need realistic expectations. And you do probably need 30 to 60 days at least to get this up and running. So those are the pieces that you're going to have in place. It is going to set up your practice for success in the future. It's still going to require a whole lot of work from you, right? Business ownership is not for the faint of heart, no matter what your upfront budget is. So I hope you will continue to follow along next week. Go to therapyforyourmoney.com to look at some of the resources that we've shared in this series and some of the tools that you can use to get your practice up and running. And while you're there on the website, if you have comments or there's resources that you want to share with us that you have used to start your practice, send us a message. Let us know. We're happy to share that with our audience as well and to update our show notes to include those too. All right. See you next week. That's it for today's episode of Therapy for Your Money. Catch us on Instagram and Facebook at Therapy for Your Money Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to Green Oak Accounting on YouTube. Until next time.
The information contained in this podcast represents the host and guest's general opinions and should not be construed as personalized accounting and tax advice. Listeners should consider all facts and circumstances before applying this information and seek appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional. Any info provided does not constitute accounting, tax, or legal advice.